Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. So today is going to be a little bit different. Each month or every 3 months we have a thing called Youth Sunday, and so this week it is my week to do the morning time for Sunday sermon for the day. So I am going to record this and I'm going to upload this as a video to my YouTube, and it may be a little lengthy, but it's going to be good. And I just will be talking basically to them, but you guys will hear me as well. So I'm going to completely record myself doing it. So I hope that you guys like it and it's not too difficult to kind of navigate and keep up with. So the name of my lesson, or the title of my lesson this morning, is going to be From Pit to Palace. And today we're going to talk about the story of Joseph. Everyone knows the story of Joseph, and this has always been my favorite personally, because I just can remember being so young, and Maki and Rashad, I'm sure y'all can relate, but being in the room, we used to be in the room and watch TV all the time and watch movies. But when I think about this, I just think about the story of Joseph, King of Dreams. And so with this story, I was always able to kind of like remember, and it just always stuck to me, because for me, it's hard for me to remember stories, but like when I see a movie, it really sticks to me, especially in childhood. So it's always been one of my favorite stories, and also just how God was just with him every step of the way, and how he never took his hands off of Joseph. So we're just going to go through a little bit of backstory when it comes down to him and his life. So as we know, Joseph was Jacob and his second wife Rachel's son. His entire story is in Genesis 37 through 50. And Joseph was very much loved by his father because he was born into old age. And we all know, when we talk and think about Joseph, we think of his colorful coat his dad had gifted him. And we also know, because of the favoritism shown, his brothers did not take it well, and they were extremely, extremely jealous of him. Joseph also told his brothers about his dream. And with this, I'm going to get DJ to go ahead and read Genesis 37, 5 through 8.
Genesis 37, 5 through 8. And Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told it to his brethren, and they hated him yet the more. And he said unto them, Hear, I pray you, this dream which I have dreamed. For behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my chef arose and also stood upright, and behold, your sheaves stood round about and made obstinance to my sheaf. And his brethren said to him, Shalt thou indeed reign over us, and shalt thou indeed have dominion over us? And they hated him yet the more for his dreams and for his words.
Amen. And so what DJ just read, like I said, the last thing I left off with was Joseph told his brothers about his dream. And so this pretty much made up of why Joseph went through what he did. It kind of like spiraled out into what he ended up going through. So let's just talk about what he went through when he was actually sold. Because of the jealousy of his brothers had for him, they sold him. They actually were going to kill him, but God spoke through Reuben, and somehow, some way, Reuben suggested that they not harm him and kill him, but that they sell him. And so with this, I'm going to go ahead and get Dad to read Genesis chapter 37, 12 through 36. Amen.
It says, and his brethren went to feed their father's flock in Shechem. And Israel said unto Joseph, Do not thy brethren feed the flock in Shechem? Come, and I will send thee unto them. And he said to him, Here am I. And he said to him, Go, I pray thee, see whether it be well with thy brethren, and well with the flocks, and bring me word again. So he sent him out of the vale of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. And a certain man found him, and behold, he was wandering in the field. And the man asked him, saying, What seekest thou? And he said, I seek my brethren, tell me, I pray thee, where they feed their flocks. And the man said, They are departed hence, for I heard them say, Let us go to Dothan. And Joseph went after his brethren and found them in Dothan. And when they saw him afar off, even before he them, they conspire against him to slay him. And they said one to another, Behold, this dreamer cometh. Come now, therefore, and let us slay him, and cast him into some pit. And we will say, Some evil beast hath devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dream. And Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands, and said, Let us not kill him. And Reuben said unto them, Shed no blood, but cast him into this pit that is in the wilderness, and lay no hands upon him, that he might rid him out of their hands to deliver him to his father again. And it came to pass, when Joseph was come unto his brethren, that they stripped Joseph out of his coat of many colors that was on him. And they took him and cast him into a pit, and the pit was empty, there was no water in it. When they sat down to eat bread, and they lifted up their eyes and looked, and behold, a company of Ishmaelites came from Gilead with their camels bearing spicery and balm and myrrh, going to carry it down to Egypt. And Judah said unto his brethren, What profit is it if we slay our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Israelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh. And his brethren was content. Then there passed by Midianites merchantmen, and they drew and lifted up Joseph out of the pit, and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver, and they brought Joseph into Egypt. And Reuben returned unto the pit, and behold, Joseph was not in the pit, and he rent his clothes. And he returned unto his brother and said, The child is not, and now whither shall I go? And they took Joseph's coat and killed the kid of the goat and dipped the coat in the blood. And they sent the coat of many colors, and they brought it to their father and said, This have we found. Know now whether it be thy son's coat or no. And he knew it and said, It is my son's coat, and evil beast hath devoured him. Joseph is without doubt rent in pieces. And Jacob rent his clothes and put sackcloth upon his loins and mourned for his son many days. And all his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. He said, For I will go down into the grave until my son's morning. Thus his father wept for him. And the Midianites sold him into Egypt until Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh's and captain of the guard. Amen.
Amen. Daddy, thank you for reading that. It was kind of lengthy, but I appreciate it. Okay, so with that being said, I'm sure that Joseph had to walk in the hot sun and freezing weather when he was being sold. And once he got to the place where everyone was being sold, he was very shocked to see people being sold and the work they were doing. I'm sure he was very confused and did not know what was going on. We all know that even during this horrible and scary time in Joseph's life, God had him, and he was right there with him the entire time, y'all. Even though he went through what he went through, God had his hands upon him, and he never let go of Joseph. And things could have been way worse, but God had his hands upon him. Amen. So because he was, I'm kind of based a little bit of this off the movie, and also just in the word. But because he was on the skinnier side, the people that were placing everyone said that he would be perfect to work on the inside. And so they got him ready and prepared to work. And could you just imagine what was going on in his mind? I mean, for me, I am not like the person to, I'm not good with stuff like that. I would have had probably a whole panic attack. I mean, it was just a lot going through his mind. He probably just didn't understand. I mean, he had betrayal of his own brothers. And then now he was taken away from his home into this unfamiliar place. I'm sure that he was angry. He was extremely hurt. He was sad and also frustrated, not understanding why he had to go through what he was going through at the time. And so the favor of God was with him. It goes back to what I said. Even though he was in the situation he was in, he was able to be inside and didn't have to be in the hot sun and work all day. So how many of you can relate to Joseph? Maybe not being sold by his brothers, but in other situations in life where you find yourself in an unfamiliar place and you really don't understand why. Potiphar really grew to like him and trust Joseph. And this was nothing but the favor of God, because then things took a turn, and Potiphar's wife tried to sleep with Joseph. And Joseph denied it, and she lied on him, which brings us into a whole nother dimension of what he had to go through. He was put into a cold cave with the butler and the baker, and God was still able to use Joseph in his interpreting of his dreams. Inside the cave were two men. The butler and the baker. Sorry, y'all. They were wondering what their dreams had meant. So for the butler, he told the butler that he would be freed in 3 days. And when he was to tell Pharaoh about him, he said, please don't forget about me. And then for the baker, he got a complete opposite response from Joseph. And Joseph said that in 3 days he was going to be beheaded. And so once again, that was God's favor. But still, Joseph did not understand why he was going through what he did. And a very long time after, and according to the Bible, it was 2 whole years after, y'all, because of the dream of the interpretation from the butler, he did forget, but then he was able to come back and tell Pharaoh about Joseph. And in the cave, he was able to interpret. He was able to interpret for him that there was going to be 7 years of abundance, followed by 7 years of famine. And so Joseph also told him that 1/5 of grain should be stored, and in the years of famine, it should be given back to the people. Amen. So God was able to bless him through interpreting that dream. No one else was able to do that, and it was all in God's plan the entire time. Through God speaking through him and his dreams, he was able to save Israel, God's chosen people. So as we know, the 7 years of famine came, and Joseph's brother came to get food. Once again, can you imagine what was going on in his mind? I'm sure he was just completely like shocked. It had been so many years that he had seen them, and that time had gone by. And once again, I'm sure that Joseph was really hurt because a lot of things took place, such as his mother had passed away. So he never even got to tell his mother goodbye. He never got to say goodbye to his father. And he never got to see his father grow old. He was taken completely away from his home and in a total unfamiliar place. But God had him all that time and knew exactly what he was doing. All I can think about is the favor of God when I think about Joseph. God sent him to save his family and all of Israel. And Joseph went from pit to palace despite the detours he endured in life. So a detour is an unexpected part of life's journey, finding yourself in an unfamiliar territory, and your surroundings are also unfamiliar. So I'm going to switch over right here. And as we study the life of Joseph, we find that in order for Joseph's dream to be fulfilled, he had to face 3 roadblocks and detours. In facing each roadblock, Joseph passed a significant test, and he was positioned in case to be moved closer to the fulfillment of God's plan. You see, there are 2 times that he was tested the most. We are tested in the success of our lives and how we handle the success we are given. We are also tested in the low points of our life. The testimony of Joseph's life is that he successfully navigated both the success and the low points. He walked in humility, integrity, faith, and he modeled forgiveness at all times. Now let's take a moment and review the roadblocks and detours faced by Joseph. The first of these roadblocks came by the way of his brothers, who threw him into a pit and then devised a plan to trick their dad into thinking that Joseph was dead. Later, we find that when we saw a band of Mennonite traders, they sold Joseph to them. He became a slave, which is unethical to the dream that Joseph had. He was serving rather than being served. And for us this morning, we could define this roadblock as rejection or abandonment. The roadblock of rejection is a tough roadblock as it affects our person. When we have been rejected, it can affect the core of who we are. But we must remember that through we may be rejected by people, God does not reject us. DJ, can I get you to read Psalms 94:14-15, please?
not cast off his people, neither will he forsake his inheritance. But judgment shall return unto righteousness, and all the upright in heart shall follow it.
Amen. The second roadblock came from Joseph when he was promoted to be Potiphar's right-hand man. He was so successful and favored that Potiphar recognized this skill and set him up to be the manager of everything he had owned. Joseph had full reign in Potiphar's house. He could do anything that he wanted. Potiphar's wife as well, we see in the story, saw how handsome and good looking he was. She continually made passes at him, but he refused to compromise his integrity. After one final push by Potiphar's wife, rather than give into temptation, he ran. In doing so, he left his cloak behind, and Potiphar's wife used it to falsely accuse him. Potiphar was incensed over this, that he had thrown Joseph into the prison. But while he was falsely accused, he is still not forgotten by God. And now we come into the third detour. We find that Joseph finds favor with the prison guard. He is able to come and go as he wishes. And at some point in time, Joseph finds that he has company in the prison. The baker and the cupbearer for the Pharaoh had offended Pharaoh, and he had put them into prison. Joseph and his new prison mates become close, so close, in fact, that when he had his dreams, they reached out to Joseph to interpret those dreams. The cupbearer's dreams show the cupbearer being restored to his position as the cupbearer of the Pharaoh. For the baker, however, the interpretation was not as positive, like I said earlier, and he was to be hanged in 3 days. The cupbearer made a promise that he would put in good word for Joseph, but he did forget. And this speaks to us all the broken promises that happens in our life. But we must remember that God does not break his promises. He is true to his word. His word is yes and amen. As we look at the detours in Joseph's life, we find that there are great lessons to be learned. The first of these lessons is that God will use the detours and roadblocks in our life to bring out his will and let his will be done. Look at the timeline of what happens to Joseph. If he had not been sold into slavery, he would not have ended up in Egypt. If he had not ended up in Egypt, he would not have been noticed by Potiphar. If Potiphar had not had him in charge of his household, he would not have been seduced by Potiphar's wife and would have ended up in prison. If he did not end up in prison, he would not have met the cupbearer who had connections with Pharaoh. If he had not been forgotten, the timing of his release would not have been perfect time for Pharaoh's need to be met. If he had not been able to interpret Pharaoh's dream, he would not have been promoted to being Pharaoh's right-hand man, who would eventually control all of Egypt. And do you see how amazing that looks on Joseph's life? What seemed like major detours and roadblocks were actually God's plan to position him for God's glory and the fulfillment of God's plan in his life. And that goes to show, even though sometimes our life may seem like it's not going the way that it needs to go, these detours are only going to make us better. And at the end of the day, like I said in the beginning, is that God knows. And the whole time, God did not take his hands up off of Joseph. And today, God has his hands on each and every one of us. What seemed to be a plan for evil, God continued to use these things for good in order to make Joseph's dream a reality. Secondly, notice that with each roadblock and detour, the Bible tells us that God was with Joseph. Even though in the natural, he did not see the hand of God or believe that things were working out the way they should have, God was still there. This reminds me of a very popular story of the footprints. There are times that we see God working less in our life, but in reality, he's working best in these moments. Because he saw God was with him and was working on his behalf, this aided Joseph's outlook on life, and he did not focus on what he lost, but the integrity of his character and the presence of God in his life. With God's presence being with Joseph, we found that God made Joseph successful. Thirdly, God uses detours of life to mold, shape, and prepare us for what he has for us, and to fulfill the dreams and visions he has given us. Here is the amazing fact in Joseph's life. The detour that came to Joseph resulted in growth in him personally and fulfillment of God's plan practically. The testings of life can bring and grow and the release of blessings in our lives. It is noteworthy that scientists have found that the giant redwood trees of the California require fire to grow and survive. They need the heat of fire to open the cone, which contains more than 200 seeds. You see, the seeds are not fully released until there is fire. So it is with us. Sometimes our greatest growth occurs in the furnace of difficulty. It is there that we come out pure gold. Daddy, can you read 1 Peter 1, 6 through 7?
It said, "When ye greatly rejoice, though now for a season, if indeed be ye are in heaviness through manifold temptation, that the trials of your faith, being much more precious than of gold that perish through, though it be tried with fire, might be found unto praise and honor and glory at the appearing of Jesus Christ."
Amen. Thank you. Peter, of all people, understood this. Our trials and the difficulties we face serve to purify and strengthen us if we allow them to. They will make us better, or they will make us bitter. Fourth, even when we have a directive from God, it does not mean that we would not face adverse circumstances. Too many times we interpret that God's will is at work when we are in the place where everything is going well. And if it is going well, then it must be in God's will. But that is not the case all the time, because we can be encountered with God's will and yet still face difficult times. It is here that the promises of DJ, can you get Proverbs 16:9, please?
It says, "A man's heart deviseth his way, but the Lord directed his steps."
Amen. So it is here that the promises of Proverbs 16:9 come to play. It is so amazing that when our hearts are in alignment with God's heart, He will direct us to the place that we need to be. We don't plan it, but it happens because it is God directing our steps. Fifth, the one great solution to abandonment, rejection, false accusation, and being forgotten is forgiveness. If Joseph held on to that hurt and that pain of his past, he would not be able to welcome his brothers into the palace, and they would not have been reunited in the way they were. We find this in Joseph's words in Genesis 50:19 through 21. It says, "Do not fear, for I am in the place of God. As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should keep it alive as they are today. So do not fear, I will provide for you and your little ones." Thus he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. He not only speaks the words, but he gives his words actions. He lives his talk, and he extends grace and forgiveness to the very one that deserves it the least. So today I just want to ask you, what are your detours in life right now? So for me, yes, I understand that detours can disappoint. And when I think about detours, I can just think about, when I'm driving, and when you're thinking that you're going a certain way, but then you're using the map and it ends up detouring you a whole different way. And for me, especially if I'm in an unfamiliar place, I start to get sweaty. I start to turn the music down because I'm like, okay, I need to focus on this road. Like, I don't know where I'm going. And it can be very confusing because once again, you're in an unfamiliar place, and you just wonder, like, oh my gosh, like, where am I going? You just have to really trust in that map. And in this instance, you have to really trust in God that He's going to be with you and He's going to guide you through this detour in life. So yes, detours can disappoint momentarily, but when you allow them to produce hope, God promises that hope will not disappoint. Daddy, can you get Romans 8:28?
It says, "And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are called according to His purpose."
Amen. So it's the highs and lows of faith. Joseph was ready for his sudden rise to power, and he saved thousands of lives from starvation and the economy being ruined. We need more people like that to rise up like Joseph, who fear God, have prophetic revelation, and who are great leaders with the skills of implement a rescue plan. Amen. Never let go of your God-given dreams. Even if you start off in a pit or a prison like Joseph, you may end up in a palace. No matter where you started, you can have a great finish. And even if you are in a pit today, God can still raise you up and do great things through you and in you. Amen. And I just want to finish this off by saying, even in this pandemic, God can use you. Even in a bad situation, God can still use you. And like they said, even in the pit, if you're at the bottom of the bottom, God can still use you and raise you up to be in that palace. And no matter what detours that we take in life, God is with us. Like I said at the beginning, he is with us every second of the day. Amen. And he knows that finishing touch. It doesn't matter what man say or what we go through in this life. God has a plan for each and every one of us. And we will make it to the top as long as we keep our eyes focused on God and we keep him first in our life. Amen. And with that being said, I have made it to 25 minutes and 34 seconds and I am finished with my lesson.